This video is sponsored by Squarespace. More about them later. I did a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon HeartGold using only water-type Pokémon, and boy does Johto have some really unique swimmers. Having access to so many potential teammates is great, because in a Nuzlocke, if a Pokémon faints in battle, it's dead forever. Here's the rest of my rule set, but with that, let me introduce you to my very first encounter, Phelps the Toothy Totodile. This mischievous rascal is gonna need to do some serious heavy lifting in the early moments of our journey, since our first challenge involves summiting a tower filled to the brim with Bellsprouts. Fortunately, they're all at a remarkably low level because otherwise we'd have some serious problems. Before facing the living pun that is Elder Lee, I score a Wooper Egg off the black market, and after just a short spell of parenthood, out pops little Ledecky, ready to help out Phelps in any way she can. Now, Ledecky's part ground typing makes her aggressively bad against Elder Lee's Bellsprouts, but Phelps takes care of them just fine with some
Rage Gaming. Yes, Phelps, let the hate flow through you. Destroy your enemies, Phelps, show them no mercy. Leave nothing but bones and build your throne from their calcified remains.
With Elder Lee defeated, it's time for our very first gym battle against Faulkner and his flying types. And best case scenario, Phelps can just sweep through his team with another round of
Rage Gaming.
But life is rarely the best case scenario. It all starts swimmingly, with Pidgey giving Phelps an attack boost as he hits us with a wimpy tackle. This means that we can get a clean kill with Bite on the second turn, perfectly priming my Crunchy Croc for a showdown against Pidgeotto. But this dodo didn't come all the way from the Mediterranean to go down without a fight, as he lands a critical hit Gust to bring Phelps into the yellow. Despite a critical hit Rage to match, we're in trouble. A second Gust drops my starter down to just 7 HP, and even though that gives us another rage boost, our Bite leaves Pidgeotto in the yellow. Phelps has done all he can do, so now it's up to Ledecky to close out the match. She comes in on another Gust, and the damage reveals that without another critical hit, Ledecky should be able to survive 2 more. After another Gust, we nail the Feathered Beast with a water gun, bringing him down into the red. All seems well as Ledecky prepares to deliver the finishing blow. But then Faulkner goes for a roost, and his Ace's HP bar shoots back up into the green. Our water gun does far too little damage, and now Ledecky will only be able to get off, at best, one last hit before going down. I've got exactly 1 out. If Pidgeotto goes for Roost again, he'll drop his flying type for the rest of the turn, letting Ledecky hit a mud shot that will lower his speed and allow Phelps to attack before going down. It's my only chance to win this fight, so I gotta take it. But since Pidgeotto just goes for damage, all hope is lost. Ledecky flubs the mud shot and then falls to a tackle. Phelps comes back out but simply gets outsped and felled by one final Gust, so just like that, attempt 1 is over. With so few resources at this point in the game, there's nothing we can do but try again and hope that things go a bit better. On attempt 2, Phelps has a brave nature, and my Wooper is male, so therefore named Lochte. As Phelps once again faces off against Faulkner's Pidgey, things immediately get out of hand, as instead of hitting us with a soft tackle, the tiny bird goes for a sand attack. So, not wanting to potentially risk misses against Pidgeotto, I decide to switch out to Lochte on another sand attack, and then back to Phelps on another sand attack. The goal is to be able to kill this thing without getting any accuracy drops, but as the turns tick by, that seems to be borderline impossible to do. Every time Phelps comes in, Pidgey hits us with a sand attack. Eventually, Lochte brings our foe into the red, such that all we need to do is switch Phelps in on a tackle and take the KO with a rage, but literally 6 times in a row, Pidgey refuses to let Phelps come in on anything other than sand attack. And it seems like this would have gone on forever were it not for Lochte actually falling into KO range, thereby finally baiting a tackle as I switch to Phelps for the umpteenth time. But with that, he's free to take the KO with a rage, growing to level 14 in the process. Pidgeotto comes in, and he immediately hits a non-critical hit Gust to give us a boost as we continue the rage train. A second Gust gives us a second boost on the next turn, meaning that our third and final rage hits with the power of a critical hit. But with that, it's time to end this feathered purgatory. Pidgeotto fires off one last lackluster Gust, giving us a third attack boost that lets Phelps nail the bird with a +3 bite for the kill. Mamma mia, Pidgeotto's got some bulk, huh? Instead of healing, Faulkner keeps his foot on the gas and fires off another gust. So a critical hit here, and Mikey is a goner. But with 5 HP, Phelps claps back with a bite, at long last winning us the very first gym badge of the challenge. Well, it took you long enough. 6 minutes to beat 2 pigeons? I thought you were supposed to be, good at this game. Hey, I've never claimed to be good at this game. I'm just a boy standing in front of an eerily similar looking boy talking about the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. Oh my God. Squarespace is an online platform that helps you build and manage your own website, whether that's an online store for your business or a personal blog for your thoughts. Using their guided design system, Squarespace Blueprint, you can choose from curated layouts and styling options to build a distinguished and professional online presence from the ground up. It makes the perfect website tailored to whatever your brand or business may be, and optimizes the site for every device. Plus, with integrated SEO tools, your passion project is sure to show up more often to more people. I use Squarespace to create the website that critics are calling a lock-in for Best Picture, PoppyHG.com, the only destination to find curated pictures of my corgi puppy Poppy. And if you haven't already, you should explore PoppyHG.com's video library, created with Squarespace's video collection feature. Squarespace also has a ton of other features, like analytic information about the traffic of your website, and online stores to help monetize your passion, meaning that you're sure to get the most out of your Squarespace subscription. So if you're looking to start a website for your business or hobby or corgi, then you should check out squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch your website, you can use my custom link to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and to you for using my links. It really helps me out a ton. Now, let's get back to the challenge. With that confoundingly difficult obstacle behind us, it's time for some new encounters. For in the Pokemon Center on Route 32, I'm gifted the Old Rod, which means it's time for an action-packed fishing montage. Well, this is fun. Eventually, I'm able to pull 3 new teammates: Spitz the Poliwag, Beyond-D the Magikarp, and Torres the Krabby. All important in their own rights, yes, but it's Torres who will be vital for the fight against the next gym leader in Azalea Town. Before that, though, I head into Slowpoke Well, where I catch... You're never gonna believe this, but I catch a Slowpoke. I name him Popov, and with all 6 team slots filled out, I set my sights on Bugsy and the second gym badge. He's got a horrifyingly powerful Scyther, but that's where Torres comes in. She can learn the TM for Rock Tomb, which grants her a way to hit Scyther for quad-effective damage, 80% of the time. That's obviously a terrible miss, but as Scyther goes for a Focus Energy on the next turn, we get one more swing of the bat, and this one connects, though we do come up just short of the one-shot. So, after a Citrus Berry brings Bugsy's ace out of healing range, I switch to Phelps, who heroically eats a massive U-turn that generously does not crit. With Metapod coming in, I switch back to Torres, who takes just a bit of damage before getting the KO, and forcing Scyther back out. So it's time for another round of Russian Roulette. Scyther sets up with a Focus Energy, and Torres connects with a Rock Tomb, knocking out Scyther and effectively winning us the battle. All that remains is Kakuna, who falls to a few confusions from Popov, which then officially nets us the second gym badge. But surprisingly, Bugsy is not the biggest threat in Azalea Town. No, that would be our rival Dope, whose Grass-type Bayleaf threatens my entire team of Water types, even after Phelps evolves into his teenage form. Dope leads with Ghastly, who falls to 2 confusions from Popov without doing a lick of damage. So the aforementioned Bayleaf comes in second, and he immediately sets up a Reflect as Popov goes for a Yawn. A Poison Powder delays the big damage by another turn, as a critical hit Confusion does a brutally small bit of chip to the bulky dino. But now that he's asleep, I switch to Phelps, who starts hammering away with Bite, though a quick 1-turn wake up lets Bayleaf heal back to full HP with a Synthesis. So it's clear that we're gonna need to lower this thing's defense with Leer, which is what I do on the following turn. A second poison powder comes out in retaliation, but now as the reflect wears off, Bayleaf takes the opportunity to set up another, simultaneously revealing that our two starters are in fact speed tied. On the following turn, Bayleaf wins another speed tie and finally fires off a Razor Leaf, one that would have eradicated Phelps with a crit. A third Leer means that Bayleaf should take big damage from our physical attacks, though Phelps is of course no longer safe to stay in. My best bet is to bring in Torres, our strongest physical attacker, but switching directly into a Razor Leaf is a bad idea. We need a free switch, meaning that someone needs to take one for the team. But how can I possibly choose who to sacrifice? All 6 of my teammates, equally beloved, have the right to a full and healthy life. Who am I to determine which one of them must die so the others can live? This is the curse of being a Nuzlocker. For what are we but foolish children attempting to play God? The least I can do is not make this decision lightly. So I mull, I ponder, I muse. For hours, days, and weeks I struggle with whom to sacrifice to the Lord of the Leaf. Sleepless nights turn into restless mornings. I miss meals. I feel like a phantom in my own body, riddled by the weight of this immense decision. But eventually I make my choice. And poor, innocent, pathetic Beyondie switches in. For a moment his life is spared as Bayleaf misses his first Razor Leaf, but then, on the following turn, our ferocious fish is slain. Torres takes the field in Beyondie's place, and with a Rock Tomb, she does a solid chunk of damage as Bayleaf opts for a poison powder. With that though, our rival's reflect wears off, letting us take the kill with a full-powered Vice Grip. Zubat is Dope's third and final Pokemon, so he falls to a few hits from Spitz, and with that, the battle is over. But how can we move on from the death of Beyondie? What am I to do now that this once beautiful soul is nothing more than a lifeless corpse?
The bay leaf really seals in the flavor.
As we make it to Goldenrod City, I set my sights on the biggest run-ender of the early game, Whitney and her Miltank. First though, I just need to head to the radio tower and collect the radio card by answering a few questions. Can you check the town map with your Pokegear? Obviously. Nidorina can only be female? That's true. Kurt uses apricots as ingredients? Nice try, he uses apricorns. It's impossible to use a TM on Everywhere I go, I see his face. Rest in peace, Beyondie. You were so sweet and delicious and no. We must be strong. This is what Beyondie would have wanted. It's what his legacy deserves. As the battle with Whitney begins, my teammates are ready to give it all to keep this run and the memory of sweet Beyondie alive and well. Against Whitney's lead Clefairy, I send out Torres, who much to my dismay doesn't do enough with Vice Grip for the 2-shot. Fortunately, Clefairy only gets 2 hits from Double Slap, so as our second Vice Grip brings her into the red, things could be a lot worse. For example, she could have used Metronome to pull Poison Fang, which in and of itself doesn't do much damage, but does manage to badly poison Torres, thereby crippling my most physically defensive Pokemon before Miltank even takes the field. By the time Whitney heals with a Super Potion and we've brought her back down into the red with a few more Vice Grips, we've taken so much damage from Poison and Double Slaps that I decide it's best to switch to Phelps, though this gets moderately punished by Clefairy nailing us with 3 hits from Double Slap, the first 2 of which crit, resulting in a not so insignificant chunk of damage as Phelps finally takes the KO with a Rage. The Dairy Cow comes in now and immediately woos Phelps with her romantic aura. Phelps does manage to break through to hit his lover with a Leer, but now Miltank starts going for stomps, meaning that we've got to break through flinches and infatuation, which Phelps does not. I risk a crit for another chance at another Leer, but our hapless simp gets flinched again. So now it's a switch to Popop. He gets hit by a big stomp, and even though he can take another and avoid the flinch to get off a yawn, Miltank has a Lumberry, so this is not all that helpful in the short term. I switch to Lochte on another stomp as the Lumberry does indeed awaken Miltank from her short snooze. I've really only got one out here, and it's a long shot, but it involves Lochte surviving a second stomp and getting off a mud shot to lower the Beefcake's speed, which he does successfully do. Then it's a switch to Spitz on another stomp, and now that we outspeed, our Poliwag can fire off a Hail Mary Hypnosis. It does connect, but that's only part of the puzzle, because now we gotta capitalize on the few precious turns of sleep we have. Sadly, all I can do is some marginal damage with Headbutt, though as Miltank stays asleep for the first few turns, my hopes start to grow. With just a bit of luck, we might be able to do this. And after all, Headbutt has a really solid chance of flinching, so if Miltank manages to get flinched on the turn she wakes up, we can just put her back to sleep. But sadly, Miltank does not flinch when she wakes up, and so Spitz falls to a second stomp, marking death number 2. With that sacrifice, though, I can bring in Torres. We should outspeed, so all we gotta do is take advantage of Miltank's -1 defense and get the kill with a Vice Grip, but it's simply not enough. This lets Miltank get off a milk drink, and from there, it's all over. Torres tries to give us a fighting chance by lowering Miltank's speed with another Rock Tomb before she falls, but as Phelps comes out, Whitney uses her second Super Potion, and without any flinches from Headbutt, down 2 goes Phelps. Even at -2, Popov and Lochte don't outspeed, so just a few turns later, I've wiped to Whitney, and attempt 2 is done. The good news, or rather the hopeful news, is that there were definitely things I could have done to better prepare for that fight. Some of you might have been yelling a few of them through the screen for the last 5 minutes, but probably the biggest mistake was not picking up the HM for Rock Smash, which would have given at least Torres the Krabby a much better move with which to deal damage, and would have certainly won me the battle. So in attempt 3, I make sure to grab it from Route 36. On the third time around, we avoid any bad RNG against Faulkner as Phelps sweeps through with some good old
Rage Gaming.
Against Bugsy, my Krabby, now named Lochte, manages to not miss Rock Tomb on the very first turn, resulting in yet another sweep for badge number 2. Our rival Dope and his Bayleaf still slice through Beyondy like a perfectly cooked fish fillet.
Still good. Still good.
But with that, we've fairly quickly made it back to Goldenrod City. Here's the new team for attempt 3, with a few nicknames shuffled around to match the appropriate genders. This time, with a bit of luck, I think these guys will be able to do it. Against Whitney's pesky Clefairy, I once again lead with Lochte, who now does well over 50% with a Rock Smash, though this rather frustratingly does trigger Cute Charm. Our pink foe also immediately goes rogue with a Metronome, which pulls freaking Leaf Blade. Definitely not the worst move she could have used, but it's not the best. Because of the Cute Charm, I decide to switch to Phelps as Whitney cuts me a break and whiffs a Mimic. With a second Rock Smash, we take the KO, putting us in a much better position to face off against Miltank. She once again hits Phelps with the Attract, and this time her utter beauty is too much for my starter to handle. I stay in for a turn to try again, but Miltank's love is a drug that Phelps just can't get enough of. If I don't switch him out now, he'll be using for the rest of his life. Naiad the Slowpoke comes in on another stomp, so now it's time to get a little lucky. Instead of yawning, I opt for Growls to lower Miltank's attack. This obviously risks critical hits all over the place, but it's still my best bet. Slow though she may be, Naiad manages to avoid flinches and crits for 3 turns in a row, bringing Miltank down to -3 attack. With just 2 HP remaining, her job is done, so it's off to fellow lady swimmer Torres the Whooper on a random move rollout. This is pretty scary. Thankfully, Torres resists rollout, but after a few turns, it'll hit with a max base power of 480, so even with the attack drops, I don't think Torres is living that. Especially if this stupid thing keeps critting. All I can do is hit mud shots and hope for the best, but things are looking really bad. A third hit doesn't crit and does 5 damage, meaning that Torres is almost certainly dead to Miltank's 5th hit. But somewhere an angel is looking down on our armless warrior because Miltank misses her 4th rollout, meaning that Torres will live to see another day. Or rather, she will as long as Miltank doesn't land a critical hit right here. Okay, well, flinch sucks, but let's not press our luck any more than that. I bring in Lochte, who still needs to dodge critical hits, but is at least fast enough to avoid flinches. Our first Rock Smash does solid damage and gets the 50% chance at a defense drop, meaning that as long as Lochte dodges one last critical hit stomp, we've got this. And he does. So with a second rock smash, Miltank falls, Whitney is defeated, and the third gym badge is ours. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally got a run. After showing mercy to the squiggly tree on Route 36, the campaign arrives in Ecruteak City, where I immediately run into Billiam. After he blathers about some abject nonsense, I follow him back to his parents' house in Goldenrod City, where he gives me an Eevee named Thorpe. With a bold nature, he's the perfect would-be Vaporeon, but in order to evolve him, we'll need a Water Stone, which means I have no choice but to return to the Pokeathlon Dome. This hellish coliseum houses the most brutal and physically grueling competition in Johto, all televised to entertain the bloodthirsty masses. Here, Pokemon are forced to fight tooth and nail in a series of athletic competitions that range from the relatively straightforward hurdle race to the absolutely barbaric ring toss, all for the hopes of earning a few points to purchase some otherwise unattainable items. But the violence on the stage is a mere distraction from the real horrors of the Pokeathlon Dome. For peeling back the curtain reveals an arbitrary point system, one that does not favor athletic excellence, but one that rigs winners to fuel televised narratives so that the nation stays tuned in and the money continues to flow. The Pokeathlon is nothing more than an ideologically bankrupt ruse designed to make the rich richer at the expense of the meek and helpless. Being involved in such a corrupt endeavor makes me sick, but it's a necessity if I wish to continue my journey. Eventually, I earn the points to purchase a Water Stone, and with it, Thorpe the Vaporeon becomes the 6th member of the team. Thorpe's not the only one evolving, because with the new level cap, Torres can also evolve into Quagsire. Now, there's actually a bunch of new encounters to get here. The Good Rod in Olivine City means that I can fish in a handful of places around Johto, and there's also a potential Marill encounter in Mount Mortar. The only issue is that almost all of these Pokemon have ridiculously low encounter rates. Like, Marill's is literally 1%. Why? We don't have time for that. So instead, I decide to move full steam ahead with our current squad, and their next mission is to take down Beyondi's killer in the Burn Tower. But thanks to an Ice Beam TM from the Goldenrod Game Corner, Bayleaf is now much less of an issue. As we get up to the level cap of 25 to match Morty's Gengar, Coughlin the Poliwag evolves into Poliwhirl. But she's not stopping there, because a Water Stone wasn't the only thing I picked up from the Pokeathlon Dome. I also scored a King's Rock, which with the help of Uncle Jim Tendo, I can use to fully evolve Coughlin into Politoed. I'm not sure if she's better than Poliwrath. I mean, having a fighting type would be pretty nice, but this game already tries so hard to prevent you from using actual Johto Pokemon that I might as well jump on an opportunity if I get it. So for the same reason, I also evolve Naiad into Slowking. This is objectively the wrong choice. Slowbro is significantly better than Slowking since the former gets Slack Off, but I don't know if I've ever used Slowking in a Nuzlocke, so welcome aboard, you goofy freak. Now, Naiad's not going to be all that helpful against Morty's ghost types, but the special bulk of Coughlin and Thorpe are going to be extremely important if we want to get through his Shadow Balling ace. First, though, is Ghastly, who gets easily outsped and one-shot by a critical hit Surf from our new froggy friend. Gengar comes in second, though, and with a mean look, he locks Coughlin in for a battle to the death. This does let us fire off a Surf, though, which hits for massive damage. Enough that even with a Citrus Berry, a second one might be able to get the KO. So all we gotta do is take a Shadow Ball. Despite the critical hit, Coughlin hangs on with just 9 HP, and with a second Surf, she does indeed get the KO. Word of advice, never ever get into a cage match with a frog. Those things are monsters. With Morty down to just 2 Pokemon, the match is all but over. His remaining 2 Haunters are a bit annoying since they're faster than most of my Pokemon and love spamming status moves, but with enough patient switching, I can bring Naiad in and take both KOs with a few confusions. Never mind, I guess she was helpful against Morty's ghost types. That's badge number 4. And with half of the gym badges under our belt, I can use Surf outside of battle to explore the western Johtonian seas. But before that, I head back to Union Cave because in the basement, I can catch a lonely Leprod named Spitz. Despite a pretty lousy brave nature, I have high hopes for Spitz. Shell Armor is a phenomenal ability and Leprod is a bulky beast. Surely he'll be a pivotal member of the team moving forward. So for the first time in the playthrough, I replace one of the original members of the team. I know you crushed the early game, Lochte, but now it's time for you to retire. So no hard feelings, right buddy? At the very least, Lochte won't be boxing it up alone, because en route to Cianwood City, I catch Popov the Tentacool and Dressel the Adamant Mantine. The latter temporarily replaces my new Ice type for the fight against Chuck, whose ace Poliwrath is actually pretty tough for my team of water types to handle. Naiad can hit her with super effective stab psychic moves, but since she only knows Confusion and Poliwrath is quite bulky, this could get out of hand if I'm not careful. At the very least, all 6 of my teammates are fully evolved now that Phelps has evolved into Feraligatr, though my lead into Chuck's Primeape is once again the fearless Coughlin. With a zoom lens, the goal is to take Primeape out with just a few surfs as he sets up with Double Team. In fact, a single surf is almost enough for the clean one-shot, but on the following turn, something happens that I've never seen in my entire life. Meathead Chuck makes a genuinely good play and switches out Primeape into Poliwrath, who is completely immune to our attacks. So from here, it's a tale as old as time, the classic showdown between a frog and like a half tadpole, half Mario mutant thing. Our best bet is to spam Body Slam, which works well as Poliwrath attempts to use Focus Punch. Our second Body Slam manages to paralyze and then immediately causes a full paralysis, so now you know how it feels, Chuck. A third Body Slam triggers our foe's Citrus Berry as he gets fully paralyzed for a second turn in a row. Chuck's bad luck ends there though, as after eating a fourth Body Slam, he connects with a Hypnosis. And as vicious as Coughlin may be, she also knows when it's time to throw in the towel. So out she goes and in comes Naiad on a pretty brutal Focus Punch. Fortunately, with the paralysis, we actually outspeed Poliwrath and can start firing off Confusions, as Chuck proves that he's still as sharp as the eraser side of a pencil by going for Surfs. A Hyper Potion prolongs the inevitable, but just a few turns later, Naiad wins the matchup with 38 HP to spare. So Primeape comes back out and goes for another Double Team, which instantly causes Naiad to miss, meaning that all of a sudden, things are pretty scary since we now risk getting nailed by a Focus Punch. Side note, accuracy strats are infuriating, and there's like 7 bosses in this game that use them, and I hate it so much. I decide to switch to Torres on a resisted Rock Slide. That's not much damage, but on the next turn, Primeape prepares for a Focus Punch, and Torres misses. So Focus Punch connects, and thankfully Torres survives in the yellow. I decide that there's no better play than to hope that we don't miss again. After all, at just +1 evasion, our move should still be 75% accurate. So Primeape preps for the Focus Punch, and Torres connects, knocking out the pig monkey before we lose any teammates. That was way too close, but that's badge number 5. And the good news is that the next chunk of this game is extremely easy. Some would say too easy, and those people are right. Pryce doesn't threaten my Pokemon at all, though Spitz does manage to get hit by an accuracy drop from Piloswine's Mud Bomb and miss all of his moves. But that's to be expected from Spitz, who is probably the worst Lapra I've ever had. Like, just the pinnacle of disappointment. 485 pounds of sheer embarrassment, but more on that later. Jasmine's Steel types are completely swept by Torres, and the entire Team Rocket storyline is just a series of battles where I repeatedly click Surf with Coughlin. The next even remotely difficult challenge is the 8th and final gym leader Claire in Blackthorn City, though her Dragon types, I reason, should be pretty well checked by Spitz, the part Ice-type Lapra. He can even learn Thunderbolt for Claire's lead Gyarados, so all we gotta do is tank a single Dragon Rage before getting the one-hit KO. Can you do anything? Well, weirdly, Claire decides to switch Gyarados out into her first Dragonair, so our next Thunderbolt does basically nothing. And if you thought that first switch was strange, you'll never guess what happens on the following turn. Yeah, Claire switches out her Dragonair for her other Dragonair, which I guess at least gets me a safe switch into Torres. She eats a pretty strong Dragon Pulse, but then retaliates with a massive Earthquake. Risking a crit, I stay in on another Dragon Pulse to fire off a Yawn. Secretly, I was hoping to nail the Gyarados as she came in, but I guess 3 switches is where Claire draws the line. Anyways, now I switch out to Coughlin the Goat, who takes one last critical hit Dragon Pulse before Dragonair falls asleep and then gets nuked by an Ice Beam. Claire's spare comes in on the following turn, and even with Spitz's chip damage, an Ice Beam's not enough for the KO. but since we get the lucky freeze, Coughlin stays right around half health as 2 more ice beams, following a hyper potion heal, get the second KO of the fight. But that brings out Kingdra, which is where things get tricky. And by tricky, I mean that we just gotta dodge some sniper boosted crits. That little thing. Naiad comes in on a fairly soft Dragon Pulse before Claire then opts for a smokescreen, though that thankfully doesn't affect the accuracy of our yawn. Before Kingdra falls asleep, she fires off another Dragon Pulse, and Naiad manages to successfully break through the smokescreen to connect with a Zen Headbutt. So then it's back to Spitz, who can hopefully take the KO with a few ice beams before Kingdra wakes up. One hit triggers a citrus berry as Kingdra snoozes. Another turn of sleep lets Spitz fire off a second ice beam, and this one crits, though as should be expected, Spitz comes up just short of the KO. But it doesn't matter because on the following turn, even though Kingdra wakes up, all she does is fire off a hyper beam, which only does half damage thanks to our held Chillin' Berry. Honestly, I didn't think that would come into play, but nice. With one final ice beam, Spitz gets the first KO of his career, leaving Claire with her lead Gyarados. She heals with a full restore, so yet again our Thunderbolt brings her down into the red. But since all we gotta do is eat a Dragon Rage, Spitz manages to pull through and win us the 8th and final gym badge. Perhaps I misjudged you, buddy. You're alright. Anywho, a short trip through Victory Road, and we've officially made it to the Indigo Plateau, where the toughest challenge since Whitney awaits. My final team is strong, and though most of them aren't exactly speed demons, they're ready to give it everything they've got and become champions of the Pokemon League. So let's do this. First up is Willard, and without a way to hit his Pokemon for a super effective stab, my best bet is to lead with the one who started it all. With a Choice Scarf, Phelps can outspeed and hit Will's lead Xatu with a Crunch, but it's not enough for the KO, meaning that we get hit by a Psychic before ultimately taking the kill with a second Crunch. Jinx is next and generously just dies to a single needless critical hit. But third is the Grass-type Exeggutor, a huge problem for my Water types, who's sure to single-handedly— just kidding, she doesn't know a Grass-type move, so Phelps is free to hit another Crunch before falling asleep from a Hypnosis. Then I switch to Thorpe on another Psychic, which does a solid chunk before we retaliate with an Ice Beam for the KO. Next up is Slowbro, so we nail her with a Shadow Ball for well over 50%, as she just goes for Curse. Wrong setup move, Chief. RIP. That just leaves Xatu, who outspeeds to land another Psychic, but with Thorpe's general bulk, we can shake it off and clap back with an Ice Beam that doesn't one-shot, but once again does freeze. And with a held Citrus Berry, Will doesn't even heal, so one last Ice Beam wins us the first battle of the Elite Four. Oh no, why are you here? We didn't even get that lucky. One Ice Beam freeze on a Xatu that had nothing to threaten my team? Get out of here, Cloth of Averages, shoot! Second for the Elite Four is the recently promoted Koga, and my answer into his first few Pokemon is Naiad, who once again, with the help of a Choice Scarf, is actually able to outspeed Ariados and take the kill with a Flamethrower. Quite the enigma Slowking is. Naiad also outspeeds and one-shots Fortress, who comes in next. After that, though, things get trickier because third is Muck, who knows Toxic, Gunk Shot, Screech, and Minimize. Yay. Since we're scarfed up and therefore locked into Flamethrower, I gotta switch out to Torres as Muck surprisingly goes on the offense with a Gunk Shot. We resist the attack, but thanks to a critical hit, we still take a good chunk of damage. Muck then sets up with a Minimize. Fortunately, I gave Torres the Zoom Lens, which means that even at +1 evasion, we still have a 90% chance to hit our moves. And with our very first Earthquake connecting, things are looking promising. Unfortunately, even with Black Sludge recovery, Koga heals, though at the very least, Torres pulls through and connects with a second Earthquake as well. But then things take a turn. Well, first Muck actually misses his second Gunk Shot, so that's nice, but then Torres misses her third Earthquake. And on the following turn, Muck connects with a third Gunk Shot that poisons before we miss our fourth Earthquake. By this point, Muck's Black Sludge recovery has brought him well back into the yellow, and with Poison Chip, Torres can no longer stay in. The rest of my team doesn't have the best defense, and with Muck's phenomenal special bulk, my only real answer is Phelps, who can hopefully take the KO with a Mystic Water boosted Waterfall. He comes in on Gunk Shot number 4, which isn't enough for the 2-shot, unless we get poisoned. So now we're in trouble. Phelps needs to hit through just one minimize with Waterfall, and it needs to be enough to get the KO here, because otherwise Muck has the chance to take the kill with his 5th and final gunk shot. So come on, Phelps, you got this. Everything we've been through has built up to this moment, buddy. Show him what you've got. In another life, Phelps lands that waterfall and leads our team to the Hall of Fame. He's lauded as a champion, a hero, and a fighter. But in this life, Phelps has to settle for being a martyr. With Muck completely out of gunk shot PP, I bring Torres back in, hoping that she can get the revenge kill with another earthquake. But after a second minimize, she misses a now 72% accurate earthquake. And despite my frustration with her, sacrificing Torres for one last chance at taking out Muck is extremely stupid. So I bring in Naiad on minimize number 3. At this point, Black Sludge has brought Muck back over 50%, which is extremely depressing. I decide that my best bet is to hit this demon with Yawn, which never misses, before getting nailed by a Toxic. Then it's off to Thorpe on a Screech. As Muck creeps back closer and closer to full HP, at least he falls asleep, giving Thorpe a few chances to fire off Surfs before getting hit by a Toxic. We manage to connect with one, and thanks to our held choice specs, it does a huge chunk of damage, though again, it's not enough to get the kill. We then proceed to miss 3 Surfs in a row, which allows Muck to wake up, hit a few Screeches, and then ultimately connect with a Toxic. This, and I cannot stress this enough, fucking sucks. I decide to switch to Coughlin as Muck goes for minimize number 4, is it? I don't know. That means that our attacks have a measly 43% chance of connecting. But never tell Coughlin the odds, because she connects with her very first Surf, finally ending our long national nightmare and bringing in Crobat, who sets up with Double Team. Why? Who hurt you, Koga? Now, thankfully, Coughlin the goat appears to be immune to bullshit because she successfully connects with her Ice Beam for well over 50%. And even with a held Citrus Berry, a second one should get the kill as long as we connect, which after grunting a wing attack, we do. That means that Koga is down to his final Pokemon, and since it's just a weak Venomoth, Coughlin stays in to hit a Surf, shrug off a Toxic thanks to our held Pecha Berry, and finally get the last kill of the fight with one more Surf. Losing Phelps was brutal, yes, and Torres' performance left a little bit to be desired, but that could have gone much worse, especially if Coughlin didn't clutch up as hard as she did. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, we've earned a bit of goodwill with the Cloth of Averages. Rest in peace, Mikey. Bruno ideally isn't all that difficult. Thorpe immediately starts things off by using a few Surfs to drown Hitmontop without taking any damage, thanks to his bizarre decision to go for counter. Against Hitmonchan, I switch to Torres on the Thunder Punch, and believe it or not, with a Choice Scarf, we're able to actually outspeed him. 2 Earthquakes get the KO, with Torres taking only an Ice Punch worth of damage in the process. Still doesn't make up for the bed shit against Koga, but it is a start. Now Hitmonlee still outspeeds us, so I switch to Naiad, who, like I was hoping, comes in on a Swagger. Thanks to her own tempo ability, she can't get confused, but she still gets the +2 attack boost, which means that after shrugging off a high jump kick, we can easily take the KO with a Zoom Lens boosted Zen Headbutt. That brings in Onyx, and since I don't want to lose the attack boost, Naiad unfortunately eats a solid Earthquake before taking the KO with Surf. So last is Machamp. He 2 outspeeds and fires off a Cross Chop, but since we dodged the crit, Naiad can fire back with another +2 Zen Headbutt, scoring an impressive one-hit KO. And with that last bit of XP, she grows to level 48, where we finally learn Psychic. As great as Zen Headbutt was for this fight, it's nice to get a stab Psychic move that abuses Slowking's phenomenal special attack. With that though, there's just one last member of the Elite Four, and it's Karen. She leads with Umbreon, so I send in Thorpe for a showdown of the evolutions. Fortunately, we're faster, though Surf isn't enough for the 2-shot against the bulky pup. And since we get hit by a Confuse Ray anyways, I decide to call off the dogfight and switch out to Torres on a payback. A second Confuse Ray comes out before we get the chance to hit Umbreon with a Yawn, though fortunately it does successfully connect. So it's back to Thorpe on a feint attack before Umbreon falls asleep. I make sure to use Ice Beam so as not to trigger the heal, but after that, a second Surf gets the KO and brings in Vileplume as expected. With Petal Dance, she's a pretty big threat, especially if she lands a crit. So this seems like the perfect job for Spitz, who can't be crit, to come in and take the KO with a Choice Specs Ice Beam. The only problem is that Vileplume uses Stun Spore on the switch, meaning that we no longer outspeed. Though since she can't get the one-shot with Petal Dance, this isn't an issue unless Spitz gets fully paralyzed, which he obviously does. Like, seriously, Spitz is so useless. He can't do anything. Okay. Unfortunately, this means we need to dodge some crits and also probably sacrifice Thorpe. He comes in on a nasty Petal Dance that brings him down to just 70 HP. Vileplume gets confused from fatigue, which does give us a chance, though I'm not optimistic. My little water dog fires off an Ice Beam that brings Vileplume into the yellow, and then Vileplume hurts herself in confusion. Thorpe lives! Karen heals with a full restore, but since 2 more Ice Beams take the KO, Thorpe narrowly manages to avoid the death almost wrought by Spitz's mediocrity. Karen's third Pokemon is Gengar, and by exercising a bit of patience to avoid potential Destiny Bonds via Yawn from Naiad, Coughlin is safe to get the speedy KO with a few Choice Scarf Surfs. And with that same Choice Scarf, she also outspeeds Houndoom, who falls to 2 more Surfs. Murkrow is last, but after again lulling her to sleep with Naiad, I can bring Coughlin back in and take the kill with an Ice Beam, officially defeating the Elite Four and earning us an audience with the league champion Lance. This guy is a beast and his dragon types are no joke, especially the 3 bulky Dragonites that threaten massive neutral damage with Dragon Rush and Outrage. His first Pokemon is Gyarados though, and instead of leading with Spitz the Useless, I bring in Naiad to put him to sleep with a Yawn. The idea here is to whittle away at Gyarados until he's in range of a KO from Coughlin's Choice Specs Ice Beam. The issue is that Gyarados is really bulky, so he's gotta be pretty low. Eventually, after a heal, Naiad pulls it off, and as Gyarados snoozes in the red, Coughlin comes in and takes the kill as the prophecy was written. The reason for all of this song and dance is that Coughlin's pure water typing should bait in the first 2 of Lance's Dragonites since they both know Thunder Wave. And by locking ourselves into Ice Beam, it's now completely free to take 2 quick KOs, assuming that Coughlin is strong enough to do so, which she is. So that just leaves the back half of Lance's team, starting first with an Aerodactyl that knows Thunder Wave. Since he outspeeds and we can't take the KO with Ice Beam anyways, I switch to Naiad. An Aerial Ace doesn't do no damage, but it's still not nearly enough to prevent a Yawn. So I bring in Spitz on the next Aerial Ace, our foe falls asleep, and then with a stab boosted Ice Beam, we bring the Aerodactyl into the yellow. Terrible! But in Spit's shittiness, I see an opportunity. I bring Torres back in and simply spam Yawn until Aerodactyl wakes up. This ensures that after we've successfully connected with a Yawn, I can switch to Coughlin on a single Aerial Ace, and then lock her back into Ice Beam without risking a hit from Thunderfang. This puts the team's MVP in the perfect position to get her 5th kill of the fight by once again sniping Lance's final Dragonite with another Choice Specs boosted Ice Beam. Imagine this being the last thing you see before you die. No wait, imagine this being the last thing you see before you die. Lance's final Pokemon is unfortunately for him also his worst. Any number of my Pokemon could drown this Fire-Flying type Charizard, though since Coughlin is locked into Ice Beam, I do gotta switch. As an olive branch, I decide to give Spitz the honor of landing the final KO. Since he underspeeds Charizard, we do have to take 2 Air Slashes, but after tanking the second one and living with just 25 HP, Spitz gets flinched. You are so bad. Alright, well, Thorpe remains at full HP, so he comes in and gets the kill with a critical hit Surf. See how easy that was, Spitz? What is wrong with you? Whatever, just like that, despite Spitz's best effort, we've become champions of the Pokemon League and made it to the Hall of Fame. But we're not done there. Nope, there's 8 more gym leaders in Kanto and 1 final fight with the strongest trainer in the game, Pokemon Trainer Red. With Phelps gone though, we do need to add a new team member before we embark on our whirlwind adventure across Kanto. Sorry, Lochte, it's nothing personal. Fortunately, most of the Kanto gym leaders are pretty easy with a halfway decent team. Admittedly, it makes this stretch of the game pretty boring, but what are you gonna do? The 16th and final gym leader Blue can be tricky, especially because he leads with an Exeggutor that can use Trick Room. With a diverse team like Blue's, making it through in one piece is all about anticipating which Pokemon will come out next. Against his lead Exeggutor, for example, I want to take the KO with Spitz since his Ice typing baits in Machamp, who is a pretty tough Pokemon to deal with. It takes a bit of patience to play around Trick Room, Leaf Storm, and Hypnosis, but eventually I can bring Spitz in at a point where our foe is at low enough HP that even he can't mess this up. Ice Beam takes the KO and successfully baits in Machamp, who we manage to outspeed and one-shot with Sheer Cold, which never misses thanks to No Guard. That's a big problem taken care of, and finally a positive performance in Spitz's disastrous career. He also manages to one-shot Blue's Rhydon with a Surf, but I mean, anyone could have done that. Arcanine is 4th, so it's time for another dogfight. Thorpe sorta eats a few Flare Blitzes, using his held leftovers to give himself just a bit more bulk, as a single Surf after recoil damage does enough to get the KO. Pidgeot is a little scary with Return, but without a crit, Thorpe is free to tank one and fire off an Ice Beam. Then, after Torres comes in to hit the bird with a Yawn, again risking a crit or two, Naiad finishes things off with a few Psychics, though again, it requires dodging some crits. Last is Gyarados, so I switch to Coughlin on a lucky waterfall. She uses Perish Song to seal Gyarados' fate in 3 turns, and after eating a return, I switch to Spitz as Blue sets up with Dragon Dance, though believe it or not, since Gyarados can't crit, Spitz is actually completely safe to eat a +1 return, and then take the KO with a magnet-boosted Thunderbolt. So, okay, credit where credit is due. Spitz is really coming into his own in the 11th hour, and that'll be important as we prepare to face the final challenge of the game. The only issue is that in order to summit Mount Silver and challenge Red, I need to use Rock Climb, which my current 6 teammates cannot learn. So I've got to head back to Route 35 north of Goldenrod City, where I catch Katie Ledecky, the bashful Psyduck. And despite Thorpe's fantastic performance throughout this challenge, especially in the Elite Four, he's on the bench as we make it to the summit of Mount Silver. Red remains silent as we approach his perch and the final battle of the playthrough begins. He leads with Pikachu, who is effectively useless against the oldest surviving member of the team. It helps that Red whiffs an Iron Tail, so as the little rat falls to a devastating Earthquake, Torres remains at full HP minus the 1 turn of Hail Chip. That brings in Venusaur, which means I gotta switch to Dressel the Mantine on a neutral Giga Drain. With our massive special defense stat, it doesn't do much, and thanks to the Hail, we're free to retaliate with a Choice Specs boosted, perfectly accurate Blizzard that does an abysmal amount of damage. Seriously? That's it? Well, I grossly overestimated Dressel, and I'm sure Lochte is cackling from the box, but thankfully Venusaur just misses a Sleep Powder, so I lucked out there. One more Blizzard gets the KO, and Red brings in his 3rd Pokemon, Snorlax. Definitely scary since we've got no way to hit him for super effective damage, but we do have our ringer, Little Leducky, now a Golduck, and she's holding a Sticky Barb, which gets transferred to Snorlax after he uses Crunch. This means that the big bear is taking a sizable chunk of HP at the end of every turn. Yes, he's doing way more damage to us, especially since his first crunch dropped Leducky's defense, but the chip is important because it means that after staying in for a turn to hit a Tail Whip, I can bring Torres back in on a 3rd crunch, and after a 3rd turn of chip, get the KO with an Earthquake. That brings Blastoise in 4th, so I switch to Naiad on a Blizzard, which freezes. All of a sudden, things are looking pretty bad. With Grass Knot, Naiad was really our only answer to Blastoise. I can stay in and hope we thaw out before we go down, but a critical hit Focus Blast means, oh look, we thawed out. Well, great. Okay, here I was thinking I was gonna need to do a whole dramatic eulogy for Naiad, but I guess not. 2 Grass Knots get the KO and bring out Lapra. So it's off to Spitz on a Body Slam for the honor battle of the ages. With Leftovers, Recovery, and Thunderbolt, we actually have the advantage, though that can change in an instant if Red's Lapra manages to paralyze with Body Slam. But he doesn't. I'm stunned. 3 chances to paralyze with Body Slam and nothing? That's completely unheard of. So not only does Spitz manage to win the honor battle, he also does it with a very solid chunk of HP remaining. And with Charizard as Red's final Pokemon, we can stay in to tank a Flare Blitz that does just enough recoil damage so that we can take the KO with one last surf. Okay, well, Spitz can only not suck for so long, but with the Hail Chip, Charizard falls, winning us not just the battle against Red, but the entire run. That was a surprisingly challenging playthrough. I knew there were a lot of potential encounters, so I decided to play it without doing as many calcs and doing very little EV training, which made for some pretty tricky fights in the early and late game. It was a lot of fun though, and I think for a challenge like this, it's the perfect way to make the playthrough harder without making it basically impossible and or extremely luck dependent. Anyways, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Or don't, I don't know, but I do know that you should follow me on Twitch to keep up with streams of my current ROM hack challenges. Stay tuned for more Nuzlocke videos, and until then, remember to always, always, always play around the critical hit.